What's going on, everyone? It's your boy Steiner here from Secondhand Talent, as always, with another episode. For this week's interview, we have the incredibly crazy artistic mind of Shawn Byous. Shawn, thank you so much for being a part of the program.
Thank
Now,
you. Appreciate it. Honored to be here.
for for each one of our guests, we have the same question that we ask to each one, which is if you had never heard the term before, right? What does secondhand talent mean to you?
Mm. That's uh it just sounds like you're keeping it real with
Right on.
your your just your fan base and the kind of people you interview and stuff. It just doesn't sound pretentious, but it sounds like grassroots, down to earth, raw. It's just what comes to mind. Yeah. I like it.
Hey, I'll take it. That's why we like to ask the question unfiltered.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it here because now for our listeners who are listening and not watching, behind Sean right now is an incredible montage of some of his artwork there. And I highly recommend you guys all check it out. The link to Sean's website is going to be in the comments and description of the episode. So bayous.art, go check that out for sure and take a look at some of his work. Um, I guess that's the best place to jump in now that I think about it is kind of what I'm looking at the wall and I have some of these prints that are behind you in my own collection.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh, that's cool.
it
Yeah,
still
yeah.
kind of blows my mind every time I see them, just how wild they are. And I part of me wants to jump right into the why are they so wild, but I think maybe we should take a step back and like what kind of got you into, let's say, art and then this kind of surrealist space that you occupy.
Uh let's see. Well, I think one was just growing up with not much else to do. We didn't have sidewalks for skateboarding because I grew up in the country and everybody was far apart and I couldn't drive. And this was before we didn't have video games or anything to, you know, pull me away. So that was pretty much all I had to do is just disappear into my own world, sort of. And my brother was a big inspiration. I, I look at his drawings and just he's 2 years older than me, and I just like look at the date and make it a goal to be as good as he was at that time.
That's
When I
a
get to be his age, I'm going to be that good
that's a
and
really
just never look
amazing
back.
benchmark. That's an amazing benchmark to kind of have your brother as that person where you're like, this is my bar
Yeah.
for where I want to be artistically. That's
Yeah.
have you reached that point? Are you better than
Yeah.
him now, or is it still a contest?
I hope so. Yeah, it's not a contest. I don't know. It's weird because I guess at the time I probably saw art as a contest, but not anymore so much. I just feel like it's no more a contest. It's apples and oranges. Everybody's got it's just a personality, and you can't really quantify and hold them against each other. So it's just, but
That's a
at first
great
it was a real challenge.
sure. I mean, it's that chip for motivation, as you're kind of getting, you need to find
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
like it's like, they would say, how
Right.
Tom Brady would find, he would have his wall, right? And he had like all these names and faces, or it was like that was his motivation to keep going, even if he was friends with them, you know, like it was just to be like, I am gonna hold
Yeah.
this because it keeps me in this winning mentality. But
Yeah.
it's really cool to
Oh
hear
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say it's cool to hear that like you reach a point where It's not a contest. Because really, like, we
Yeah.
can say now, we know it's not, and as our listeners know, I started doing stand up because I couldn't play any instruments, and it infuriated
Oh
me that
yeah.
my brothers were really good at all instruments and I couldn't do anything, so I became a comedian out of spite.
Yeah.
Um, and
That's great.
but today, like, I truly appreciate their talents and abilities, and I just respect their craft and what they're able to do and accomplish. Like, it was for me when I started definitely that kind of like self-motivating factor, which is kind of why it was really
Yeah.
cool to hear from you as well. But like, yeah, today for sure it's more of a like I respect, what you do. Is there like a moment that you
Right.
can point to where you kind of realize that like, hey, I'm coming into my own in this space? Like now I can acknowledge as opposed to hold myself up against?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like it was like I think it was around between 12 and 14ish that I was just drawing so much that I just was really pushing myself to learn as much as I could. And I got to the point that I hated drawing, and I
Mm.
just had to force myself to even pick up a pencil and move it at all. And just and I hated it. But I just kept pushing because at the same time I loved the outcome of it, but I was just hating forcing myself through what really sort of was a wall, because after I passed that, it's sort of like a second wind or whatever. That after that, I just I didn't hate it anymore, and it was stuck. I just sort of like I got it in a way. You know what I mean? Like it all
Yeah,
made
things
sense.
kind of fall into place, and I think that's a really great way to
Yeah,
put it. Not that because like you never fall out of love with it, but like you learn to not hate it. That's
yeah, yeah.
because I can definitely relate as a comedian, you always want that feeling of like the jokes land and you get the reaction you want,
Oh yeah,
but it sucks writing and workshopping that joke and taking it to, open mics 5 nights a week and having it suck, 4 out of 5 times before
yeah,
you get it. Like there's that process, which, you know,
yeah,
it's never like I ever fell out of love with stand up, but it's really like until you learn that it's a labor of love, it's really
yeah.
labor.
Right. Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah. I think that's one reason that you sort of have to love something to get good at it, because there's so many obstacles and speed bumps along the way that if you don't really just love it for the sake of itself, then you're probably gonna jump ship,
Well,
and
and
find something else that you like more.
absolutely. And what's really interesting, as you say that and as I'm kind of looking at the imagery, behind you, I something that I've never really noticed before as kind of like a theme in your works is either this idea of like it's either motionlessness or running to get out of the frame. It's something that I like kind of it almost I
Oh
do kind
yeah.
of get the feeling that your art is trying to either hold itself in place or like move out and burst onto the next frame.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
It's one of the fun things or one of the things I love the most about art is that is that it is just so open to interpretation. Um, and I've had it for me before where somebody will say, "Oh, this joke of yours really, really landed." I'll hear it a couple days later. Do you know how I discovered your art, by the way, all those years
Oh
ago?
no, huh?
My
No, no.
dear my dear friend Ryan. who I love very much. Shout out Ryan. Sent me a slap pack, and in that slap pack was your logo sticker,
Oh, no
and
kidding.
the hand with the flying eyeball. And
Yeah.
I remember getting that, and I showed it to Justine, my wife. It was actually the very first sticker that I gave to her because
Oh, cool.
we both loved it so much. And I just remember seeing it and I was like, I need to know more about this. Like, and then since then I've just been, blinders on, you know, eyes
Yeah.
forward. But yeah, it was a kind of a happy accident that
Oh, that's
I
cool.
became aware of your art in the first place. And another reason I'm so glad, we're sitting and doing this finally is because it does, resonate so much with me. And maybe it's the idea of like motionless or escape, but you mentioned before having come up on a farm or in a more rural area. Um,
Yeah.
that tells me a lot about kind of like the barn animals and the fast food imagery,
Oh, yeah.
vending machines and whatnot that we see in a lot of it. But
Oh,
I'm
it's
very curious to hear where like kind of how the surrealistic take came in because I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm writing, an origin story for
yeah.
your art just based on the art, it's okay, I'm here, I'm alone, I'm learning to write, I'm writing what I see around me because I don't have,
Yeah.
TV, video games, etc. And I'm just gonna make it weird. Is that kind of
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think that helped keep it interesting too. I used to just do like scenery, just like as a kid in art class and stuff for the assignments. And it was always boring. I just like
right?
want to draw a gremlin popping up from behind the tree and just add my own stuff to it because just like just take a picture. Want a picture of a tree, just take a photo. I don't know why I have
Right,
to the long route to get a picture of a tree, just
right.
but but just I think the idea of just making something that never existed or could never exist was always sort of a draw to it, to adding something like that that had never been seen before. Just having the opportunity was always just open, the whole world's open, like could be anything.
It very much makes me
So
think
that was
of
always,
it very much makes me think of like an artist like, like Lil Wayne, like where, he doesn't write, he just goes in and records. It's like that spontaneity of
oh,
it and just like
oh yeah,
I know it's going to be something unique and that's never been heard before because it's going from my brain into the microphone. Like this isn't like a
yeah,
manufactured track. It's not a photo of a sunset, right? It's me
yeah, yeah,
describing the sunset landscape to you in
yeah,
the most unique way that I know how because it's coming directly from
yeah.
me.
I like that. That's cool. Yeah, it's true. It's just unfiltered. It feels more honest. Like it's not over polished or anything, you know? It's just the idea is just so raw. That's one of the challenges actually, just not overthinking the idea.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the pitfalls of that style is is it weird enough?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I sort of hold back on the weirdness sometimes because um it almost looks like it's trying too hard if it's too weird, at least for me. I just sort of like because I could make it just like completely unhinged, and it just feels like if it goes off the rails too much, there's like nothing to hang on to, and it just looks like chaos. You know what I mean? And I'm like,
Well,
I
that
think
makes
when there's
perfect
like a
sense.
restraint, involved. I, yeah,
Is
it
that
it just a little bit, just enough to make it uh from falling off the cliff, basically. You're just riding right along the cliff, right on the edge. And I think if there's too much chaotic stuff, it just goes off and it doesn't seem interesting anymore. I don't know.
is that
That's just
why?
me.
No, that makes I totally hear that. Is that why? Because I know like lately you've been putting out things that have been, a little more fleshed out from a colored in perspective. And, with what we have available digitally, I'm sure you could colorize, any of your images any way that you want to. But is the reason you kind of skew more towards the black and white or like gray tones because you don't want to overly complicate that sensory
Uh,
output of your work?
yeah, I've always liked black and white. I don't know if it's I liked Escher a lot, MC Escher when I was
Sure.
younger. He was
Oh
a
yeah.
huge inspiration. Yeah. I don't know if that's why I've just always liked black and white. Um, I think too is because you can go from like skin to bone to fur to a jacket to anything else without changing color. You just
Right.
change the texture and it doesn't start to look muddy because all sorts of colors and it's really cohesive. I like that. But
Yeah,
um
people like to use the term shades of gray, as an example, but there really are so many shades of gray.
yeah, 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 for sure. But I have been messing with color, but even when I do it, I don't like too many colors. I don't know.
Well,
I don't
you
know.
want your you want your imagery to speak for itself as well. I mean, especially if you're pulling
Yeah.
back on some of that weirdness. I mean, and I personally, I think, your art accomplishes that. It's very, very
Oh,
clean
cool.
and very, um, I think the lack of color really also makes you focus on the art itself. Like you don't have,
Yeah.
any options really to dig into like the different color gradients. You're into those gray gradients and you're really
Yeah.
working your eyes over time to pick apart the tones and the different, it's a lot more nuanced, I find.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. It never gets old. It seems to be more timeless, I think. Like, 'cause you can't really attach black and white to a certain time. I mean, obviously the old days are black and white, but I mean, it could be any time. I don't like being attached to a certain period of time. I'd I'd rather really like it to look like it could be done 100 years ago or 300 years from now.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. Like you don't want to like 'cause that's a great point because I don't really think, music and art are really, or painting rather, drawing are the two things where people really like to um put them on a timeline and say like for
yeah,
art, right? You have the impressionist and Renaissance and Cubist and Dadaist.
yeah,
You have all these very specific art for something that's so free form really wants you to be in a box. And even with
yeah, for
with
sure.
what you do, as wacky as it is, most people would say surrealism, right? It's kind of
Yeah,
like that, and
yeah,
but I like that, what you had just said about this notion of timelessness and about how you don't want it boxed into any era. I love that because comedy does not work like that. Comedy either
oh yeah,
ages it either ages well or it ages poorly,
oh.
but either way it ages. There's the
One
like
way or the other.
it never stays in this spot where, you know, nothing that happens in the world is going to affect the delivery or the meaning of this punchline.
Oh dang, yeah, that's true.
But like
Yeah.
with what you do, and you know, there is that room for almost this kind of, like, temporal omniscience, if we wanna call it that. And then also, it's about not being relegated to any particular time, you know, just looking right behind you here, it's obvious the prints on your left are a little smaller than the print on your right, and one of the things that I was gonna
Yeah,
bring up to our wonderful listeners and viewers is that one of the things I find so fascinating about your work style is that a lot of those smaller pieces are scaled down from those larger images like that on the other side of it. How big, like, do
yeah,
you go, and what's the impetus for that and keeping it in a bigger space as opposed to confined to your sheet?
yeah. I like working really big. I've got a there's a couple on the website, drawings. One's like 9 foot by 55 inches. The other's like around 8 foot, um, with the same height, 55 inches. But those were a lot of fun. They're just takes a while for those to move.
Yeah.
Then to get them done.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, yeah, but I really enjoy working really huge because I don't know, you might be able to tell from the drawings that I like just like diving in as deep as I can with the details and stuff. But with the big one, it's almost like becoming like a little microbe and just sinking in even deeper.
I
And
mean,
you could
that to
just add more
me
and more.
yeah, to me, that's scale, 8 feet, you know? I look at a wall and I'm like, "Okay, 8 feet is yay big." And then I stand up, I'm like, 8 feet is, like, almost 3 feet taller or 2.5 feet taller than me.
Oh yeah.
That's nuts, like, how
Yeah.
like, that's big, big.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was a lot of fun. I liked it. And it was like done like a millimeter at a time, which it was like it was a lot of fun because of the pencil, the tip size, but
Right, right,
I
yeah,
don't
you can
know.
only yeah, if you're doing it by hand, there's only so much you can do at, no matter how big the
Yeah.
canvas is, you know, your hand rema the size of your hand remains the same.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't really get tired of a piece. It it's just to me it's sort of like dropping a kid off at like uh Six Flags or something. It's like they could be there all day. They're not gonna get tired of it, you know? It's just like have at it.
Yeah.
It's like okay,
Yeah, yeah,
they could
yeah.
be here for however long.
Let 'em go.
Yeah. But so it could be bigger than that. I just don't get tired of them. But there are some ideas that I start and I'm like, as soon as I started, I'm like, nope,
Mm,
because I have to like it. If I don't like it, it's not going anywhere. But once I get
nice.
one that's ready to go, I can stick with it.
So, are your designs when you're talking about regardless of whether the surface is 8 feet long or, you know, 8 inches long, do you go into your pieces with intention, like, with an image kind of in your head of what you wanna accomplish, or is it just a little bit more spontaneous than that?
Uh, and kind of a mix. Sometimes it starts with idea, and sometimes it starts with just a shape, like a vague shape that I just start to refine, and it turns into other things. There's usually no intention. I usually try to sort of keep intentions out of it. And that's the toughest part,
Mm,
is just to sort of let it go and see where it goes. And so I'm seeing it no earlier than it's happening, sort of thing, like what you were talking about with Little Wayne singing and stuff. It
right,
just
that
jump in and see.
spontaneity, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that makes a good balance with the style because the style is so refined, but then the idea is not refined at all. Just not even thought about. But uh yeah, sometimes I'll have the idea in my head before, but uh it's just a mix. I don't A lot of times I'd like to have a system to make it happen, but that just sort of goes against the whole style to begin with, to have a
Yeah,
system,
yeah,
you
I
know?
hear that.
It just starts to become mechanical after that, and like, as handy as that would be, it just sort of turns into a factory after that.
And that's the last thing
Yeah,
you really want it to become is like,
yeah,
right, is that kind of drain of like getting back to that hurdle
right.
space, where it's like it's a chore
Yeah,
because that nobody
yeah,
wants to feel like that.
yeah, but yeah, a lot of the best ideas just are all of a sudden it's that there, I see it, like the whole thing at once, you know?
Mm. So a few years
But
ago, kind of the reason I wanted to bring that up, is because when you're creating your own art for release, you have a lot more, latitude for creativity and putting things out your own way. But when you're doing a gig print, that's not always the truth. I know a few years ago you did a print for Pearl Jam, and I'd love to hear a little bit about A, how that opportunity manifested itself, and B, was that an instance where you were kind of constrained to, like, a little bit more constrained than usual? Was it more freeing? 'Cause I would imagine it's gotta be very different than,
yeah,
your normal day to day.
yeah, yeah, they weren't too constraining. They just wanted something to do with the, environment, sort of themed, and Hamilton, Canada, just somehow represented also. So I threw in a few elements, of Hamilton, like with the waterfalls and the skyline and stuff, because they've got a lot of waterfalls there. Um, but yeah, and I actually already had the log head guy with the squirrels and stuff. I already had that idea. I just never got around to using it yet. I already had this sketch, so it was really handy. I'm like, "Oh, perfect."
Yeah.
But yeah, there wasn't much, they weren't too constraining at all, really, which was good. It left a lot of freedom, so
So
that was nice, yeah.
I think that's really cool how you hear like it's like, "Wait a minute, I've got this sketch that I think would fit this opportunity really well." But so I guess I'm also just a little curious of, like, how, like,
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
those wheels in motion, like, to get that opportunity to happen. Like, were you approached by the band?
Uh, it was when I went to, by their, merchandise manager. I had a booth at Decon Designer Con in LA,
Yep.
and I was just there at the booth, and their manager came up and introduced himself. Said I might have heard of a band called Pearl Jam. Like, yeah. But um yeah, and then he just heard of them, but yeah, and then he just explained it and was like, "Yeah, I'm on board." So it was pretty quick and easy. I
That's
was
why. That's so cool.
It was
It's like
really crazy. Yeah, I'm always, yeah, it's weird.
have you
It's like I try to make those doors open, but they never do. It just has to come to
oh,
me, I guess.
yeah, forcing that stuff is never what's gonna make I wasn't expecting to hear it like that. I think that is wild that, like, you're at your decon booth and he just comes
Yeah.
up to you and like, "Hey, listen, we love the style. Why don't you make a poster for this little band?" Like, that's wild.
No, I know, right?
Super, and
Yeah, yeah. No, it was
are
cool.
gig posters something that you've wanted to do more of, or was this kind of like a flash in the pan
Uh,
type thing?
I'm Yeah. Yeah, I'm open to it. I didn't know much about it before, like, but I wasn't that familiar with that what do you call that niche
Yeah.
before he came up. I was like, oh yeah. And then I looked into it. It's like it's pretty big
Well, so we had
sort of
on
market with that stuff.
absolutely, and in season one we had on Justin Hampton, who's done poster
Oh
work
yeah.
for Queen, Primus, Mastodon, Flaming Lips, Up Down, and he, one of the things that he accomplished in 2002, with Jermaine Rogers and Emek, they were the first ones to have posters for a band at every stop on their tour. That was for Queens of the Stone Age, in 2002 and
Oh yeah.
2003 with his post-neo explosionism group. And since then, a print on, for each show has become like a pretty, that was like the genesis of it. Pearl
Oh
Jam
wow.
actually, I believe it was Pearl Jam was the ones who had started it a little bit the year prior. Um, but yeah, Queens of the Stone Age in that year were really kind of the first ones, besides for bands like Fish. But even Fish at that point didn't have a poster for every stop on the tour. It was just it was more of a novelty thing. But lately it's gotten to be much bigger. Yeah,
That's
it's
where it all
become
started. Yeah.
yeah, so that's where it all started, and it's then be since then become this thing where like it's a very cool thing. Like I mean, so we saw Ween at the Salt Shed in September last year, and they played a track for my wife and I. It was right after our wedding. We held up a sign, they played it. We have a poster from that show. And it's
That's
it's
cool.
it's it's a cool thing because you see that on the wall and you're like, I have distinct memories associated with this piece of art from this band, this venue, and it takes all of these different strands of the experience and, pulls them together in a really unique way that I feel like only art can really accomplish. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and part of what helps that, I think anybody can really make a print, anybody can generate art. Um, if I had to pick one artist, I would say your style reminds me of probably be Emek would be the closest. Like, the skulls, the lock and key, the bones, like an eternal embrace is a print that I feel like kind of is where you two meet. Um,
That's cool.
and it's your art, I feel lends itself very well to being sharp and specific enough to evocate those feelings of that the band wants you to bring in along with the music that'll help put forward those memories. So like you mentioned with the Pearl Jam print, putting in elements of Hamilton, right,
Yeah.
is one of those things that I can say as a fan, really goes, it might be a little detail to the artist, but to the fan, it's huge and means so much to see
Oh, that's
those
cool.
Easter eggs and to, have those
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bits in there that we can poke with and find that common ground and be like, yes, we have this in
Oh yeah.
common. We see this together. So
Oh, that's
it's a yeah, it's like it's a fan experience, like the detail that
yeah.
you have lends itself really well.
Yeah. That's neat to hear. That's cool.
It's just a lot of fun, and it's a lot of fun for me to know that, like, if I'm interviewing people that I look up to, there's other people that look up to them too, and it's a platform that we've created here with Secondhand Talent where we do get to give a platform to and tell the stories of artists and LDs and sound techs and vantage points. I brought it up. I discussed it, described it to someone the other day is like, because they said to me, it's like, oh, there's stories that the casual fan might not be interested in, but that like the more experienced fans would want to hear about. And I was like, well, actually, a lot of it is to bring to the casual fan questions and aspects that they might not have considered asking about. It's not,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because I think that a lot of the stuff that we talk about on the show is stuff that the casual fan would find very interesting.
Right. Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just not hip to knowing which questions to ask to get that information.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Would you be open to doing
Yeah.
more gig work down the line?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Heck
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
and we'll have the image of the print on the screen so our viewers can
Okay.
see what we've been talking about here. And then, we'll also, put up fortunately you've got a pretty good montage of art behind you. But again, for our listeners and viewers who would like to see more Byous.art, link will be in the description. Please go check it out. I can honestly say it's some of my favorite art. And
Thank
I,
you.
just personally, um, a big fan, and would like to leave off like with this final question here. For those out there who are looking up at that wall behind you and thinking like, yeah, I wanna start building up that kind of body work. I want to get into this. What's a piece of advice that you would give to someone who feels like dipping their toes into getting their art out there?
Uh, just keep at it. It just no real substitute for just the time and just keep plugging away. It just doesn't seem to happen overnight. It just takes a while and you just sort of have to love it. Yeah. Yeah. And I would say just to have fun with it too, because it with all the work, it could turn into a chore real quick if you're not having fun with it. I think that's one reason I like keeping it light and loose and fun, the idea anyway, because it's just, I don't know, it just keeps it fun, keeps you're not so constrained and stuff. But uh let's see. Yeah, I don't know. That's about all the advice I can think of.
I mean, that's the
As
right,
much as I can.
that's the right piece of advice. I mean, I think that that's great, that not feeling constrained and letting yourself kind of sink into it. And doing it.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right. Putting in the time, putting in the effort, putting in the work. Um,
yeah,
whether you feel good about it in the moment or not,
yeah,
is
yeah. And
what
there's always more to
makes
learn
it.
too. Yeah,
Yeah, very true.
yeah.
Well, well, John, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Any final words you'd like to leave us with?
Uh, I can't think of any. Usually just
Fantastic.
talking pictures. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you again so much. Appreciate you. This has been Steiner with another episode of Secondhand Talent. We will see you next week.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. I
Cool.
mean, how do you feel about it? That's it.
I
That's a
thought it
wrap.
went good.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah.
I